from home. It looks like about 79% of you, and we're excited to see that many of you attended or were able to watch the recording of the first in the series on assessment. And of course today we are covering the next step in the strategic prevention framework, which is capacity building. And we have a fantastic presenter who I will introduce shortly. We are funded under SAMHSA, and this slide is just to let you know that that we are funded under SAMHSA, and I am Wanda West. I'm your moderator for today, and I work with the South-Southwest and the Mid-America Prevention Technology Transfer Centers. Our objectives for today, oops, I'm taking you backwards. Sorry about that. So we'll be learning some of the key concepts of capacity building so that you can take that information back to your communities. And right now we're in very strange times where we're not face-to-face with our communities. So we have to think about, in a unique way, how we can share that information with them. Maybe that's through social media, maybe that's through emails, but you know, be thinking about that throughout the webinar today. What are some ways in which you can share that now during these times where, you know, everything is pretty much virtual? So what can you do to share that and strengthen your communities and keep them knit together and continue some of that work that you've already done? Next is we'll talk about how we can engage diverse community stakeholders. There's a wide variety of stakeholders, I'm sure, that you work with, and so how do we keep them engaged? And then how to develop and strengthen a prevention team. And then lastly, identify some of those opportunities to raise community awareness about the issues that you've chosen. In the assessment step, we talked about identifying that priority step. And so now, how do we get the community on board and get them behind that work? So those are our objectives for today. Next, I would like to introduce to you our amazing presenter. We feel so fortunate to have him on board today. Thank you so much, Carlton, for being with us. This is Carlton Hall, and I'm gonna give some information about you, Carlton, before we let you speak.
Sure.
He is the president and CEO of Carlton Hall Consulting. He has been providing intensive substance abuse prevention focused and community problem-solving services to the nation for the last 25 years. He spent 12 years with the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, otherwise known as CADCA, serving in several leadership positions, and including most recently acting vice president, training operations, and acting director for CADCA's National Coalition Institute. He's one of the primary architects of CADCA's National Coalition Academy. I don't know how many of you have participated in that, but it's amazing. The Academy is a year-long coalition development program, and it's designed to increase the effectiveness of communities in drug demand reduction, producing population-level outcomes. So we really have the right guy here today to talk us through this. Carlton's set of skills and experience have made him one of the most highly sought-after instructors and guides for community problems. For solving community problems in every state and territory in the nation, as well as internationally. He's had successful achievements in South Africa, Ghana, Bermuda, Kenya, and others. So again, I say we definitely have the right person here for this presentation, and lots of expertise. Feel free today to ask questions in the chat box, and we will get to them at a good stopping point. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask Carlton, we'll definitely take the time to answer questions. If there gets to be too many questions, we may take those and respond to you after the call. So, but we definitely want to get to them, and we want you to raise any questions that you have. With that, we're going to go to a poll question, and you can see there in the right-hand corner. This question is, the first step in developing community prevention strategies is, and so your options are assessment, capacity building, planning, implementation, and cultural competence. We just want to start out with this question just to get you sort of anchored into this material today and thinking about what your response might be. So I'll give you just a couple of minutes, not minutes, seconds. We still have some responses coming in, so wait just a couple of more seconds. Okay, I think we may have everybody. Oh, and then we have some people putting in their answers in the chat box. Okay, so lots of people are choosing A. We're not going to broadcast the results yet because later on in the presentation, Carlton is going to talk through, and then we'll broadcast the results. We'll show you what the responses were of everyone else on the call, and then Carlton will talk through the answers to that. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Carlton to begin our presentation today. And again, if you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat box, and we'll get to them when we can. Enjoy this time together, and we appreciate, again, you being here today. Thank you.
Rhonda, thank you so very, very much. And let me start off by saying a huge thank you for your great support in helping to craft this learning experience that we're hoping to be able to share with everyone today. I also want to add to my thanks, extending that to Elizabeth and David Clausen and Chuck Doherty, Elizabeth Hume from both the Southeast, South-Southeast Prevention Technology Transfer Centers and the Mid-America Transfer Centers, for Prevention Technology Transfer Centers. Their leadership, your leadership, has been very crucial to our nation during these times, and we thank you for your leadership. I'm so looking forward to this conversation today, and for everyone attending, it is indeed intended to be a conversation. I think a really crucial one during this time, and we are living in some strange times. I just had the privilege of working out of the country in Europe for a few weeks recently, and upon my return, finding out that I can get close to absolutely no one, and including my wife, who loves me dearly, but says the 6 feet rule is very important to stick by. So we are indeed living in some strange times, but times that I think are important and important to our field. And on a bit of a more serious note on that, I would suggest to you that COVID-19, and these are only my views, but I will share with you that I think that they present those of us in our field an important opportunity. Prevention is discussed. Prevention as policy is discussed right now, every day on the news. And the concept of flattening the curve, I think, is one that we as preventionists are able to help convey in terms of the work that we are doing and the very important life-saving work that many of you are engaged in day to day. But this national crisis provides us all with an opportunity to bring that to the fore with respect to the other crises and issues that our nation is facing. And so for that, and in that light, I think that this conversation that we're going to have today is crucial. One of the most important conversations that I think that at least I'm trying to engage the nation in as we have an opportunity to speak with those around the country. I'll start off by sharing a little bit about the strategic prevention framework, and with the work that you all are doing in the field, there is a need to understand the SPF, the Strategic Prevention Framework, in a way that is more intentional, more rigorous than I believe that we've had the opportunity to discuss in times past. We've often heard of the Strategic Prevention Framework as a process, an operating system, a set of guiding ideas and principles, and the like. It's highly important. I want to dig a little deeper and share with you that the SPF, the Strategic Prevention Framework, is a strategic planning process. It's a strategic planning tool, and a tool that I believe is one of the most essential tools for those of us who are in the work of creating community change. Prevention planners depend upon that tool and are able to apply that tool regardless of the makeup of the community and the constituencies that you're intended to serve. It is important for us to understand that the SPF is not a amorphous kind of panacea or guiding principle or context. Wanda, if you are able to hear me, I think what we need to do is go to what we had discussed earlier as Plan B. Are you still in control of the PowerPoint slides?
Yes, yep.
Fantastic. So I'm on slide 8 right now, and what I want to indicate here with slide 8 is this notion that at various levels of prevention planning, we utilize the Strategic Prevention Framework, right? So whether you're a federal agency like SAMHSA, for example, or a tribal or state government responsible for creating and crafting guidance and policies to serve the people that fall within their government, or if you're working at the local community level and you are a coalition intended on trying to create strategies and plans that would mitigate issues and challenges in your communities, or you're serving as a provider for a local institution that is intended to provide prevention services. You utilize the Strategic Prevention Framework to do a number of things, to think about allocating resources, to look at the ways in which you are identifying and planning for the implementation of evidence-based practices and strategies, looking at ways in which you might document your efforts so that you might be able to improve upon those efforts and strategies over time. And I think most importantly, and here's the intent of this conversation, looking at ways to build the capacity of those that we need to engage in this process, in this conversation of community change. The Strategic Prevention Framework is a tool that in each of those hands provides an opportunity for us to think more clearly about the work that we are all doing. So I want to dispel the notion that the SPF is some sort of mandated process that simply because I would have applied for a grant application that I now somehow have to do something different than I would otherwise do with the proper tool. My father used to have a saying that the right tool for the right job in the right hands will produce magnificent results. And so the SPF is merely a tool, like many others, but a very important one, that in the right hands and with the right capacity can do a great deal of good. For example, if you can advance the slide, please. For example, for state government, there are a number of them that are using the strategic prevention framework and infusing them in their grant application. And so why is this important for you to be a part of this academy that has been constructed? Because the SPF has become the language of prevention for many state efforts that you would want to participate in. So this particular webinar is intended to help you to be able to respond appropriately to that. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, and as Wanda spoke to earlier, there are a number of you that are coming to this webinar from many different types of community contexts and settings, working with various constituencies, and a large number of you that represent those that are working with tribes. And I just wanted to provide an example. I've worked with a number of tribes in my career, and one of the things that I've found that has been extraordinarily powerful is the way in which many who are working within tribes have found a way to identify and acknowledge the beliefs, the values of that community, utilizing the symbols and the important value systems to help those community members become full owners of the process that we're wanting to bring about in a way that that community recognizes that this is indeed something that is a good fit within the context of their community. Here in this example, a gentleman by the name of Gary Newman, who happens to be a part of the state I'm sorry, I'm getting a bunch of feedback. Wanda, can you?
Your microphone has been turned on.
Wanda, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
So this is an example that was provided by Gary Newman in his hope to provide such an example. There are many in which they utilize the symbol of the medicine wheel and the understanding and the belief of the circular natural processes as a way of infusing that and infusing the core strategies of the strategic prevention framework upon that to allow this to be something that tribal communities can then embrace as their own and in their very, very important work. Some really important guidance that I think provides a lot of good examples for us. Next slide, please. And here what you have is how a local coalition has been able to utilize this process and in Central Virginia be able to say, here's how we're going to use the strategic prevention framework in a way that informs not only our prevention efforts, but also shows us and provides for us opportunities to think about infusing our treatment and recovery efforts within the context of good data-driven decision-making practices. And so the goal and the important point of these slides were merely intended to share with you that regardless of the makeup and the context of the communities in which you're serving, The strategic prevention framework is a tool that can be adapted and applied to each of your community contexts for you all to be able to use. Next slide, please. So what I'm hoping that you all will get is that this tool is a tool that you ought to be using despite your circumstances, despite your context. And in fact, many of you already are. And throughout the entirety of this conversation, I want to challenge you to think about how you're going to take the tools, the instruments, the concepts that we are going to be speaking about and apply them uniquely to the setting in which you work and serve. And so I'm going to ask you to think about and consider a couple of questions as we go through this presentation. How are you seeing others in your work utilize these planning processes in their work? And how can you identify which of the SPF elements they're using and you are using and needing to use within your own context? So how are you going to take this and apply this to your own unique settings is what I'm challenging you all to think about, making this real for you. And if you can come up with some of that, please list that in your chat box, and we're going to kind of check in on that as we go through the nature of this presentation. Next slide, please. So I'm sharing with you that the strategic prevention framework, as we're thinking about this, is an important tool that is and consists of several characteristics that are very important for us. Important quality, starting with assessment, going through capacity, planning, implementation, and evaluation, and all being guided by two core concepts of sustainability and being culturally competent as we work through each of these elements. The idea that I want to share with you, though, is that as we think about the application of the strategic prevention framework, I want you to think about the fact that a tool is great, but there is a reason why the application of that tool in different settings, in different contexts, shows up differently. I'll give you an idea. I love to garden, right, as an example. And probably better stated is I love a good garden. I don't actually love to garden. I love a good garden. My neighbor has a beautiful garden. I look and I see the tools that my neighbor is using for his garden. I get in my car and I drive to Home Depot and I get those exact same tools. And I come back and I try to apply that to my garden. And not to belabor this, but as many of you might have guessed, my garden still doesn't look anything near what my neighbor's garden looks like. And I suggest to you that that is because while the tool is very important, it is the skills that are necessary for applying to that tool, which is very, very important. Prevention is, for me, more than just a science. It is a craft. There is a craftsmanship to the work that we're doing. The SPF provides for us the skills that are necessary in order to ensure that our community problem-solving efforts are being actualized well within the community context that we are in. And so think of each of these elements as important skill sets that we can all build upon in order to improve our community change efforts within our context, with the context of our community. Next slide, please. So if I can take just a moment, I want to go back as we're about to engage in this conversation. I want to go back and I want to look at that polling question that we started off with. And Wanda, could you share with us the results of that poll question and see just where we are?
Yes, so we had, under assessment, we had about 95% of you chose assessment as the first step in developing the community prevention strategies. And under capacity building, we had about 2%, so 2 of you. Under planning, we had 1 person choose planning. No one chose implementation, but we had about 7% choose cultural competence.
Wow, that's really important. I would have guessed that the largest majority was going to be assessment, and that I would have thought that even higher than 96% would have selected that. But it seems that a lot of you in the field are already aware that it does indeed go beyond assessment. We tend to talk about assessment as being the first step in the strategic prevention framework efforts and processes. But in fact, there are 3 elements of the SPF that we actually begin to implement whenever we're engaged in a community prevention planning effort. Wanda, if you can click the slide once and you can reveal that there are indeed 3 answers here. Yes, assessment, because it drives everything that we are doing in our work. We need to get that information, we need to get that picture and determine our readiness for change. But at the same time, that change will not occur unless we indeed build the capacity of our organization to not only collect that information, but also to engage the community with respect to our community change processing. And if we don't do that in a culturally proficient manner, we're not considerate of cultural proficiency as we do this, come to communities with a degree of respect that they are deserving, then all of this work, all of our efforts are for naught. And so while there may be an idea that assessment is the first step, it is beyond assessment, and indeed capacity plays a crucial role, which is what brings us to the conversation that we are looking forward to having with you today. Next slide, please. And so I really do hope that many of you were able to join Dr. Kyle Barrington, I think, for the first class, first webinar that they had in this academy, who did an extraordinary job in presenting all the various elements and ways in which to think about assessment. To really understand, as a good friend of mine from the University of Kansas, Dr. Vincent Francisco, who one time shared with me, it not only takes a community to do something about the problem, it takes a community to understand the context in which that problem is occurring. And if you're going to do anything about changing the behaviors of our individuals in our communities, you have to first define what is the context in which that behavior is taking place. That's what these elements of assessment really begin to speak to. Looking at how are we assessing the problems and looking at those consequential behaviors that we're trying to change, putting a picture of and creating a picture of what is it that we're trying to address, looking at the ways in which we might utilize criteria to prioritize those issues and challenges, recognizing that we can't be all things to all folks, and to understand that all of the issues and challenges that are presenting themselves are undergirded by influencers such as risk and protective factors that really undergird the issues and challenges that we're trying to address, and therefore our ability to address those risk and protective factors will lend itself to our ability to change into presenting challenges and behaviors that we're looking to. These are all skills within the context of assessment that we need to develop. In the same way, next slide, please, capacity is another skill set, but is a skill set that has to be demonstrated and will present itself if it is learned well and executed well. What am I saying about that? If I can use as another analogy, I have a beautiful daughter. She's now a beautiful, wonderful mother of 2 twin baby girls. My wife and I are grandparents, very recent grandparents, and it has absolutely changed my life. It's a wonderful joy for us to be able to watch our daughter become the wonderful mother that she has become. But when my daughter was very small, my wife taught her specific skills, taught her how to lay out her clothes the night before, taught her how to set her alarm clock, taught her how to take care of her hygiene, make sure that she not only packed her lunch but set it beside the counter next to the door in the kitchen. Taught her how to do those things, these individual skills. But there was something very practical, very pragmatic that my wife and I wanted to see my daughter be able to do. We wanted to see her be able to get up and go to school on time. That was the manifestation of the fact that she had learned those individual skills. In the same way, as we want to build capacity in our community and within our prevention teams and efforts, there are certain things that we're wanting to be able to see, to know that we are doing that well. Capacity is more than just this concept. Capacity becomes something very practical that we see. And these are the 3 practical things that we should see if we are actually developing the skill of capacity. We should see our ability to engage community stakeholders well. We should see our ability to establish and develop and strengthen a prevention team. We should see our ability in raising the issues that are of greatest concern to our community so that we're improving upon the community's knowledge around us. We're going to go into each of these a little more deeply, but I wanted to help you understand that part of what it is that we're wanting to do is share with you that we're going to move beyond the theoretical and understand how to apply this to the very practical. Next slide, please. And Wanda, if you wouldn't mind, please share with me when we are at the 10-minute mark, please. So a really important idea around and about capacity is this notion that there are 2 guiding thoughts with respect to capacity. One is that there is a real need for resources if we are going to be able to create the community changes, if we're going to execute the SPF in the manner that we want. There are human and structural resources. I'm going to get into the delineation of those resources and types of resources in just a moment. But resources are one thing. You can have resources, but if you don't have local community champions that are represented by those that have the motivation and willingness, that see that this is an urgent matter and are able to convey that so that your community then is able to pick up on their readiness to engage in this process of change, then those resources are not going to be utilized well. So you need both. Capacity is about focusing on both those ideas. Gaining resources and linking and aligning those resources to champions who are willing to take this on and have the ownership for seeing the community change processes through. Next slide, please. So if we're building capacity, We're building capacity to do what? And this is, I think, a very important slide, conveying a really important idea for many of us who find it very, very challenging to express and explain who we are and what we do to those that we want to engage in this process of change. Quite simply, there are 4 concrete things that we want to see take place as a result of our building our capacity. One is we want to see the implementation of this thinking process, this scientific thinking process that we refer to as the strategic prevention framework. These elements that we talked about need to be infused into all the decision making that is taking place within the context of our community. What's the vehicle by which that can happen? That's going to happen through our community prevention change efforts that we are championing, right? So if we're building capacity for our community to take on this scientific thinking process. The second thing is we want to see our ability to actually implement and execute specific strategies, science-based, evidence-based, research-based strategies. Third, we want to see how, through our capacity building efforts, we are engaging and supporting and linking up with all the various stakeholders within our community to sustain our own capacity to make sure that we are able to engage in this change process. We want to see the sustenance of our organization as we engage in our community change efforts. And all of those lead to the fact that what we're truly focused on is we're truly focused on changing the outcomes in our community, those behavior changes, those population-based behavior changes, and sustaining those outcomes over time. That's very, very clear in what we want to do through our prevention efforts and what we are building our capacity to do. Next slide, please. So if the first question is, what do we want to do? What do we want to see? The second question is, whose capacity are we really talking about? And here on this slide, you see a whole host of those that we will be focusing our capacity building efforts upon, whether it's community members or parents and youth or tribal organizations and leadership or other technical assistance providers sometimes. All of these groups in one shape or another utilizes or comes into contact with the strategic prevention framework. So it's important for all of those various players to understand the SPF well, and your ability to be an ambassador to allow for that to happen is vitally important to supporting your efforts of community change. So let's get into this just a bit more. Next slide, please. So as I shared with you, now that we've talked about what we want to see from our capacity building efforts and who are we interested with respect to those capacity efforts, let's talk about the individual skills that we want to see develop through our capacity efforts. The first of those skills, next slide please, being our ability to engage community stakeholders. Now this is hugely important. In fact, I would suggest that is probably the most important of all of them, because without this one, you don't get to a strong prevention team and you are not able to raise awareness. I remember going around the country and talking about the challenges that we're facing with the opioid crisis. And I remember a mother who came up to me who had lost her son, and was really struck by the fact that she, as a very good mother, son was an athlete heading to college, had a lot going for him, And she was struck by the fact that as good a mother as she was completely unaware that her child was in the kind of dangers that we are all very, very familiar with that often occur in our communities. And she wondered why she wasn't aware. What I'm sharing, and the reason I share that story is because that totally shifted my view and who's responsible for having that good mother aware. Is it the community's responsibility to know that our prevention efforts are worth taking note of? Or rather, is it our responsibility to ensure that we are conveying our prevention efforts and the importance of our prevention efforts and the urgency of our prevention efforts in ways that our communities can really understand and engage with? I shared with you that the notion of engaging our community stakeholders is of the utmost importance and requires our attention. And if we are doing that and doing that well, the first thing we want to consider, next slide please, is who needs to be involved. And the important notion of this slide is that we ought to be thoughtful and even strategic about who we're trying to engage and how we're trying to engage. Very often, many of you who are working with coalition efforts, some of you have heard about the real important notion of engaging various community stakeholders and sectors, if you will, and ensuring that you have, whether it's 12 sectors or other kinds of listings of sectors. We know the importance of having these various different types as a part of our community team. But I want to share with you that we want to think beyond going out and getting the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. And forgive me for being a little light with this, but I'm sharing that it's more than simply going out and casting a wide net. It's about being thoughtful and strategic about who has access to the resources that you need in order to produce the changes that you are focused upon. And so as you look at this list that are here on the screen in front of you, hopefully, you see a number of those that we believe are very important, of course, right? I don't think that there would be much argument about that. But as you think about your own individual community context, I'm going to ask you right now to put in the chat box, who do you think you need in order to be successful in your community change efforts? And I want to provide just a moment or two for you to address that question. Who's missing from this list that you think will also be important for you in your community change efforts? And I'll give just a moment for that. And Wanda, if you can check on that and share with me some of the thoughts that they are sharing.
Yes, absolutely. So far, boy, we have them coming in quickly. Schools and parents,
Absolutely.
Community.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Other nonprofits, teachers and counselors. We have lots. Juvenile probation officers, parents,
Yes.
youth ministries, local coalitions, media, drop-in centers, cultural associations, economic development, youth, college students, PTAs, juvenile, judge, sheriff. They're coming in really fast. So
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And the importance of asking you to kind of clarify for yourself the who you think are important. One of the important elements that I want to share with you, or aspect of this that I want to share with you, is that this is really about relationship building. So it's not merely about crafting a list and checking certain sectors off as you go through, but it's really being thoughtful and intentional about who you need, what you need with and from them, and and who is the person behind that title. When I was working in the city of Philadelphia, for example, on prevention efforts, I often said I didn't have a relationship with the Department of Recreation. I had a relationship with Michael D. Bernardinez, right? I had a relationship with Michelle Haywood. I had a relationship with individuals, and it's in the midst of that relationship building. It goes through those relationship building practices that the strength of our engagement and recruitment efforts really began to build upon. I would suggest that that holds true for you regardless of the community context that you find yourself in and serving, is to think through and be thoughtful and be strategic about your relationship building effort in an effort to engage the various stakeholders that you believe are missing. And when you invite them to be a part of your effort, you also want to think about, well, why is it that they need to be involved? Wanda, if you can go to the next slide, please. And so here on this slide, what I'm wanting to kind of offer you and share with you is the real important notion that the reason why you're inviting these folks is not simply to have them around the table. I've gone to community meeting after community meeting where I sometimes see, for example, the community policing officer who's sitting there and was told that he needed to participate or she needed to participate, but is sitting there waiting for someone to say, what is it that you want from me? What do you need me to do? And so I offer that simply as a way of sparking the conversation about thinking about the reason you're inviting folks to be a part of your team. It's not simply to have a number of folks around your team. It is really to get at what are the resources that are necessary to produce the changes that you're trying to go after. And there are 4 categories of resources that we believe are important for folks to understand. The first being human resources, right? And human resources really talk about the kind of time and the skills and the knowledge areas that you want to and that you need in order to produce the quality of change that you're looking at. Also the voices, right, that can only come when you bring those folks in and get access to the networks that they might have as a part of coming and joining and being a part of your change efforts. Material resources are simply are what you might think them to be. You know, what are the kind of supplies, the facilities that are necessary, transportation efforts. This is the where's the money conversation of that. We're all very familiar with the material resources that are often necessary, but we often get stuck there. There are structural resources that we don't often think about, though, right? Those structural resources are really what are the kinds of laws and policies and systems that are going to be in support of our change efforts or that need to be altered or affected to be able to enable our change efforts. We have to think through those structural resources that are important to us, and then that brings us to those social resources. These are the ways in which we connect with everyone. We are becoming fully aware of the need for social connection these days, but those social networks, those communication vehicles that are needed in order to help enable the change efforts that we are embarking upon. Again, I want to challenge you all and engage you in this conversation as you think about your specific change efforts and the context that you are working in. What other resources, what are the resources that you believe, what's one important resource that you believe is necessary for your change efforts, and which of those categories would you assign it? So name the resource and identify which of the categories you would assign it to. I'll just give a couple of moments to do this as well.
Okay, so
Wanda, when you start to see some, just shout them out.
I sure will. Lots of people are typing, and also just to let you know we're at 10:53.
Okay. So what do I have left?
So a little less than 10 minutes.
Thank you very much.
We'll go to the hour. So we have marketing in social resources.
Good job, excellent.
Youth, human resources.
Absolutely, you can give us some important information that we would not be able to get otherwise. Very, very good. So you
networking, grant funding.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Networking is under social, grant funding under material, people with IT expertise.
So thank you for that, Wanda, and thank you all for engaging. We really want to make sure that we were doing this in such a way that we involved you in the delivery. So you're getting the notion here that these resources are the reason why we're engaging and being thoughtful and strategic about who we're engaging. But as you're doing that, I would also suggest that there is an important quality to the way in which we engage or reach out to these individuals, and to understand that not all involvement is equal, right? And so, Wanda, if you can advance the slide, please. What we're wanting to share here is that I often see communities and prevention providers make the mistake of trying to engage everyone at the highest level of involvement, right? At the level of collaboration, meaning you're at the level where everyone is working together on a comprehensive plan to address the issues, and they are pooling their resources together, and everyone's at the table, and it's kind of kumbaya, right? But then we get discouraged when we find that not everyone is willing to invest in that way, or if they said that they were willing, they don't necessarily show up. And I know that there are a number of folks that are out there that have experienced this. And what I would suggest to you is I would suggest that there is a reason for that. And the reason is because you have different kinds of individuals that we're interacting with all of the time. And those individuals in relationship to our work start off anywhere from being at a level where they are at no involvement, where they don't have much of a relationship with us or our change efforts. They're kind of doing their own thing. They're mindful, they're respectful of what you're doing, but just don't have the time, or maybe are too focused on what it is that they're doing, or have not yet gotten a incentive to become a part of it. You're also at times working and coming into contact with those who see kind of the whole idea and the whole notion of talking and forming a relationship, in the sense that they want to share information, and they're really, really open to doing that, but they aren't necessarily coming to all of your planning meetings and involved in that way. Those that are at the cooperation level will do a bit more. They'll say, hey, we can do things together. We might be able to promote each other in a way that is beneficial to both of us, and looking at those kinds of efforts. And if you go even higher, you're talking about those that are willing to coordinate with you, and those might be those that are interested in coordinating with and on behalf of a particular event. But that might be a one-time kind of effort, or not. But they still aren't the ones that are there at the highest level of collaboration. My only idea that I wanted to share in terms of this slide is to know that there are no bad guys that are listed here, right? All of these folks are always in all of the communities that we are working with. And it would make very good strategic sense to make sure that we have a plan for communicating with and engaging with each of these that are at these various levels, right? It is important not to have the folks that are at the no involvement level turn into obstructors for your change efforts. So communicating with them respectfully is very, very helpful, and you can turn them into allies for your community change efforts. Helping to work with those that are at the cooperation level and bringing them and moving them along the continuum are things that you can do through your relationship building strategies. And so there is a good argument for understanding these levels of involvement and thinking about them strategically as you engage with your community members to be about your community change efforts. That being said, if and when you do so, next slide please, you're going to want to be thoughtful about why would they want to be engaged with you. And so you would want to consider what we know, and many of you are very familiar with the term with them, the what's in it for me concept, right? And so you want to think about kind of what are the things that will be important for them to consider. What do they think they will get out of an alliance and allegiance with you, right? And so it can go anywhere from increased ability to partner with other community organizations, gaining access to resources that they would not otherwise be able to do, and even being for the satisfaction of being a part of this effort that may be larger than their organization or their individual efforts might be to that point. There are many benefits that I would suggest that you can think about as you're engaging with your community constituents. Next slide, please.
So, Carlton?
Yes.
So we're at time now, and so I want to allow participants, those of you who need to get off the call, this was scheduled for an hour, we'll go ahead and allow you to do that. I want to take us first to those of you who need to get off the call. This is the evaluation link, and provide you with the opportunity to do that. We will continue on the call and continue to record this so that all of the information is available to everyone. I know not everyone will be able to stay on at this time. But if you take a photo of the QR code here, you will be able to complete the evaluation on your phone. And if you click on that link, it will take you straight to the evaluation as well. Now, you'll be taken to several different pages. The internet is kind of slow right now with everybody working from home, and so we ask that if you give it just a few seconds, it will take you to a different page, and that will take you to your certificate of completion. So we want everybody to have the opportunity to be able to access that. And it will be, those of you who hang on until the end, we will also make that available again at the end of the presentation. So I just want to make that available to everyone now, and then we'll go back and continue with the presentation, and that will be recorded and will be on our website and will also be emailed to each of you. Let me get you back to where you were at, Carlton.
Because we're on slide 26.
Yes. Okay, we're on develop and strengthen a prevention team.
Absolutely, and thank you all for your understanding with this. And my apologies, Wanda. we are just about done. I just want to get through these last two important ideas, and then we can open it up to whatever questions may still be there. So with that, all of that engagement of community stakeholders is really towards our ability to make sure that we're able to engage that broader population into the conversation of change that we've been talking about. The other thing that we should see as a matter of practical capacity is our ability to establish and develop a prevention team that will become strengthened through our capacity building efforts. Next slide, please. And the development of that prevention team really allows for us to focus on a number of things, right? Implementing the strategic prevention framework, asking and accessing resources, looking at ways in which we might be able to recruit, and our ability to set goals and objectives that would ensure that we're marking our efforts and the success of those efforts, weighing in on how we might be able to ensure that we're reaching out with the degree of respect that's necessary in order to engage folks, and most importantly, how we might be able to celebrate those successes along the way. A team does a whole host of things. It really serves as a vehicle for change in your community, and it's one of the very tangible, pragmatic things that we will see as a result of your capacity building. Next slide, please. And so there are a few examples of those that were kind enough to kind of share their examples and those that you might even reach out to. One such example is here listed, the All for Knox Community Prevention Team that is located in Knoxville, Tennessee. Really started off by a very strong community prevention leader, Karen Persson, who started off with the Metro Drug Coalition, director of Metro Drug Coalition, really has found a way of engaging both the grassroots and the grass tops in their efforts. Next slide, please. The Allies for Substance Abuse Prevention of Anderson County, also in Tennessee, is one of the strongest coalitions that I'm aware of in the nation. One of the things that I wanted to share about the great work that they're doing is the fact that they really illustrate the importance of documenting their impact, right? And so you can see here in this slide that what they're able to say after 10 years of work in their community, they've seen reductions of 53.5%. They're able to note the cost benefit of their prevention efforts. So for every dollar spent on prevention, they've been able to document how they're able to save that community almost more than $17. And looking at the ways in which they've been able to reach out to their broader community to engage more than 11,000 volunteer hours for their prevention efforts. All of this is vital in their capacity and of telling the story of their strong prevention team. Next slide, please. And one last one here in Southington, Connecticut, another strong prevention team that really is looking at focusing on youth development and the trying to prevent marijuana use, alcohol, and prescription drug use. Their Southington town-wide effort to promote success, or their STEPS coalition effort, is another one that I would suggest is really a great example of the kind of strong prevention team to capacity building efforts that we've been talking about. Next slide, please. And that brings us to the last component that we should see, and that is our ability to make what I refer to as the invisible visible. I think one of the most important notions of our prevention efforts is we're are highlighting, casting a spotlight on the issues and concerns of our communities in ways that build communities' education and awareness about these particular issues and challenges. And so if we are developing the skill set of capacity within our strategic prevention efforts, next slide, please. We should be able to see our capacity to meet one-on-one with our public opinion leaders, to look at ways in which we engage task members to bring their vital perspectives to our decision-making efforts and processes, looking at ways to make sure that we are included in all the various media outlets, whether it's through newspapers or through online sources, to be able to share how we might be able to raise our community's awareness in this. Next slide, please. And so, Wanda, are you seeing the infographic from SAMHSA?
Yes.
Very good.
It's never too early to start talking about underage drinking.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. And so the next 3 slides are simply slides that show different examples of why, of how we go about raising the awareness, casting a spotlight, and building the education for our prevention efforts. This one that you're seeing now is an infographic from SAMHSA, really helping to utilize data, but in really, really graphical nature to help educate those to talk about the challenges of underage drinking. Next slide, please. We also will think through ways in which to engage young people in our raising the awareness of our issues and challenges. So creating campaigns in which young people can engage with this, utilizing various graphics in a way that is much more friendly to young people's participation, thinking through how we engage young people and adding their voice to the raising of awareness is vitally important. This is one example of that. Next slide. And then lastly, really helping to use some of these as examples of raising awareness about your own efforts, about who you are, what is it that you do, as a way of demonstrating your impact and your touch in your communities around and about your prevention efforts. And so in summary, what I want to share is simply this. Next slide, please. That if we are building our skill set to deliver and execute and implement the strategic prevention framework, we're going to see our capacities in very tangible ways, engaging our community stakeholders, looking at ways in which we have established a team that's really trying to address the issues of change, and building the education and awareness of our community are all things that we should be able to see happening as a result of our efforts. It's a way of knowing that we are indeed on the right track as we are trying to install this tool called the Strategic Prevention Framework in our community. And with that, I simply want to say a huge thank you to the South-Southeast Prevention Technology Transfer Center, as well as the Mid-America Prevention Technology Transfer Center. Thank you so very much for this opportunity, and I look forward, if there are any questions, to address what we can. Thank you so much, Wanda. I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Carlton. What a wonderful presentation, and definitely holding out for. And you can't see this because I know you don't have internet right now, but we still have 106 participants still on the call. So there was definitely an interest. Yes, we thank all of you for that. We want to open up the phone line. We appreciate everyone for hanging in there with us. Actually, we're not going to open the phone line. We're going to open up the chat box. If you have questions for Carlton, this is the time. If not, you can also email your questions to us later. Okay. Not seeing any questions yet. We'll wait for just a couple of seconds. In the meantime, we will have the QR code and the survey link up on the screen for those of you who need to go ahead and get off the call. I'm not seeing any questions, Carlton. I sure want to thank everyone. I know that we had some issues with audio today, and Carlton did all of this without internet connection. At some point, we figured out that we had to he had to call in using his cell phone. So I know some of you were having a difficult time being able to hear. It was a little bit muffled, but we will have the recording, and we'll see if we can clean that up a little bit. So we did have a question come in from Amy Alston that says, when we are building capacity, how do we keep them engaged?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I suggest a couple of things. One is that we find ways in which we first start off with finding what's there with them, as I shared earlier. So what are before I would even reach out and engage someone to come and be a part of our change efforts, I find out why is it that they would want to, what's in it, what could be in it for them, and find ways in which to reinforce and support what their desire, what they want to try to get out of this. Some of them may be coming because it'd be really important. They see you as a vehicle by which they might be able to have access to important decision makers in their community. So creating kind of opportunities for networking, for example, in ways that are positive, could provide ways that would address that need. But everyone comes with a different need. I would suggest being thoughtful about it, and having and creating the space by which you're able to be planful about how you might be able to speak to some of those needs that you know are there and around your group.
Thank you, Carlton. Anyone else have questions?
I would also just add to that, Wanda, really quickly, that as I mentioned before, everyone's level of involvement is going to be different. Being able to ascertain that as well by each of your folks. Some folks can be there for a minute. There are those that will say, you know what, if you need me, call me, but I'm rather busy otherwise. Well, that's fine. We want to make sure that we engage those folks in the way that they want to be engaged and take full advantage of that, but not expect more from them than they admit that they are willing to do. And so being able to ascertain the level of engagement involvement for folks will also adjust our expectations